Act 1 of Blizzard in Baator has been out for a while. Long story short, it shows promise and is worth playing on its own right now. But there is no razor vine without thorns, so if you want to stay a while and listen to the whole chant cutter, sit back and let's get to it. If you've been trapped under ice for the last 2 years or so, Blizzard in Baator is the first adventure mod for Planescape Torment. An unofficial DLC even, as the creators like to call it due to its size. Unlike the previous attempts, however, this one already has a playable demo and a very good chance at being finished. It works on Windows, Mac, Linux, and unofficially for now, Android. All the links are in the description below. Blizzard in Baator begins when the Nameless One is back in Sigil from Carceri. The good news is you can use existing save files as long as they are from the Enhanced Edition. If you have no saves, you can jump to the beginning of the mod content right from the mortuary. It's an imperfect shortcut, but it lets you check out the mod without replaying most of the game first. While the story in the original Torment took its sweet time to develop, Blizzard in Baator gets to the point very quickly. You get a message, you go to the Smoldering Corpse bar, and you are briefed on the upcoming detour. But you know what they say, the devil's in the details. Naturally, in Act 1 we don't learn much about the infernal conflict that appears to be the center of Blizzard in Baator. It merely lays foundations for the story proper by explaining how the Nameless One ends up in Cania, the frozen 8th layer of Baator, and why the hell he lets himself be dragged into this mess so late in his journey. And I gotta give the writers credit, it is a compelling reason indeed. Cania Believe It Works, as the mod creators call themselves, are making a huge promise here, and I hope they deliver on it because they've definitely piqued my interest. Since Act 1 is just an introduction, the vast majority of it happens in Sigil. While we do briefly visit other planes of existence, including Cania, it is only a tasty aperitif for what's to come in Act 2. Of course, the devil finds work for idle hands, so Act 1 is still plenty eventful. Most notably, we are dragged into a strange faction conflict that spirals out of control. Honestly, I wasn't sold on the faction choice or the reason behind the conflict, but I think I understand the intention behind both. The former is meant as a fun and straightforward obstacle in the hero's way. The latter is a big nod to D&D CRPG fans, designed to make affairs more personal rather than relying on very niche Planescape lore. This is a very reasonable and safe design choice. Besides, the conflict features unique mechanics and several resolutions. That's rich, even if not that deep. Act 1 also has a wealth of entirely optional content to offer. Peculiar NPCs, bizarre ideas, and more conflicts with multiple ways to solve them. The shadow of the lady is also looming there, and I love it. The Cania Believe It Works team seems to understand what made us love Planescape Torment and did a ton of research. They have one hell of a reference library, let me tell you. However, Blizzard in Baator does not stick religiously to the canon because it doesn't have to. It uses a custom cosmology, which includes stuff from later editions of D&D as well. The more you are into Dungeons & Dragons, the more you will appreciate the writing of Blizzard in Baator. The script, which is over 1,000 pages long, is full of references to D&D and beyond. Most notably, one character from another Infinity Engine game plays a quite important role. There's also a minor reference to Neverwinter Nights 2, which, as you know, cannot go unnoticed on this channel. There's even a Trailer Park Boys reference here, for fuck's sakes. Way to put a smile on my face, honest to God. And just as I can watch Trailer Park Boys for the 100th time and still enjoy it, the replayability factor of Act 1 is also high. As a big-time save scammer, I had tons of fun trying different approaches. My first playthrough was pretty much a point-and-click adventure, since I was playing a dialogue-focused, lawful good TNO. I was very satisfied with the role-playing opportunities, lawful good or otherwise. If you want the last incarnation of the Nameless One to be evil, Blizzard in Baator has got you covered too. Some of the things you can have TNO do are abominable, even by his previous incarnation standards, I wager. When it comes to delightfully evil poetic justice, Mask of the Betrayer is still my #1 pick, but Blizzard in Baator is high up on the leaderboard for its application of the rule of cool, mixed with a bit of cruel. My only beef with evil deeds is that some of them are hidden behind alignment checks. Not only is there no solid reason for them, but their use is inconsistent too. Stat checks are to be expected, but those alignment checks are logically dubious. Or bullshit, if you will. Arguably, the most vile thing in Act 1 can be done by a lawful good protagonist, for example. But if he wants to worship an evil deity, he is suddenly locked out. Torment is about being able to do whatever the hell you want and change your alignment this way. And yes, you heard right. Religion is present in Blizzard and Baator. At the moment, I believe the Nameless One can become a worshipper of one deity and convince others to worship one or two others. But that's spoiler territory, so I'll leave it at that. Of course, religion is not entirely new in Torment. After all, you could become a worshipper of Eoskar in the original. Moreover, the priest was meant to be a playable character class for the Nameless One, but the idea was scrapped at some point in production. I covered this and other pieces of cut content in my video entitled Things You Don't Know About Planescape Torment. But speaking of scrapping and conscious design decisions, one concern of mine is that the writing and design along with it sometimes go in weird directions. To be clear, it's just one instance, but it's a big one, and I hope it won't be a recurring issue later on. Or maybe there is something we can't access yet and it will make everything click into place eventually. So anyway, a character drags us into a philosophical dispute about the meaning of meaning out of the blue. Perhaps the Nameless One has high enough intelligence score to engage with this, but I don't. I half expected to hear,
"I am beyond your comprehension. I am sovereign."
Jokes aside though, this encounter is no astral plane visit from Mask of the Betrayer, if you know what I mean. And it should be. It should carry plot weight. Instead, it reads like a writing flex to me. It starts with an interesting question about the meaning of good, but it cuts that topic short. Had it continued, the Nameless One could have spoken about his previous choices or even his earlier incarnations. Even the glitchy graphics in that otherwise pretty scene scream that somebody was way too much into the idea and just couldn't let it go. In any event, I'm sure we will be going back and forth between Sigil and Baator in later acts, so maybe Cania Believe It Works will come up with a way to make that encounter fit the big picture somehow. And speaking of acts, it is very doable to finish Act 1 over a weekend if you're wondering. It takes anywhere from a couple of hours to maybe 10 if you're a completionist. It depends on your playstyle, how much side content you do, and how fast you read. Unfortunately for the impatient, Act 1 ends on a cliffhanger. But hey, Act 1 is already in development and it's less of a question mark now that we have an idea of how capable Cania Believe It Works team is. Which brings me to my biggest pre-launch concern, writing. The writing in Blizzard and Baator pleasantly surprised me. I'm not going to lie, I was afraid the mod was going to be form over substance. Pretty levels without quality content to fill them with. I'm glad to report that this is not the case at all. The writing is consistently good and really shines every now and then with something funny, smart, or thoughtful. Of course, you need to simply give the mod a shot without comparing it to Planescape Torment every step of the way. Comparisons are pointless anyway, because Planescape Torment of all games has become a standard unto itself over the years. Are there any downsides to the writing? Well, the vibe of the TNO's party felt off to me sometimes, Mord being the biggest offender. But hey, it's difficult to continue somebody else's writing. I should know, I wrote the Torment fanfic some 15 years back, and it taught me the important distinction between could and should. The writers did a much better job on the original characters is all. I really wish Chris Avallone would offer some consultation or write the interactions with the old guard. And I don't think this wish is that insane either. Speaking of insane, most of the new areas are insanely beautiful. In their own Planescape-y way, that is. Atmospheric would be a better word for it. The gloom and doom of Sigil is captured especially well. I also love the tiny details like the razor vine, for instance. Interiors, on the other hand, have a varied feel, just like in the original. Although if you've seen all the trailers, you've seen almost everything. The creators definitely overdid it with promo materials. Nevertheless, the new areas fit Torment so well, you'd think they were based on some lost concept art. In total, Act 1 introduces 40-something levels of different sizes. Granted, a handful of those are unnecessary, unless there is some content planned for them in later acts. The bigger issue is that many areas feel cramped, even when not visually small. Hell, in some cases, the fog of war permanently hides quite a bit from sights. So, what's the point then? On the upside though, the animated cutscenes are a nice touch. They stay true to the style of the base game, and you can even choose low-resolution videos upon installation for some extra consistency. One pro tip though, do not install the restored footstep sounds. It's an absolute atrocity of a feature, and it's no wonder it was cut from the original game. Animation-wise, I'd say the Nameless one is a step down from the original, however. Apparently it's not that easy to animate characters even 2.5 decades later. You'll know what I mean when you see it. Another huge contributor to the atmosphere is the soundtrack. Act 1 alone features about an hour of music. While most of it is not something I'd listen to outside of Blizzard and Baator, it really adds to the feeling of immersion. Practically every area has a unique audiovisual vibe, and let me tell you, the composers treat us with some real bangers in terms of battle music. Ironically, I didn't hear much of them in-game the first time because unless somebody was really asking for it, I resolved things peacefully. Like say, these guys were asking for it, so no tears shed, no regrets. On my part, that is. Anyway, after playing the mod for a good couple of hours, I imagined this was how Torment might have sounded if Lastmord hadn't been fired in favor of Mark Morgan. And it's a welcome change. It's fresh and it fits. The voice acting is a mixed bag, obviously. Some voices seem trained or very talented, others not so much. Blizzard and Baator also restores a bunch of unused voice files from the original. Some of them feel slightly forced, perhaps, but putting those outtakes to use is a nice way to honor the legendary cast of Torment, some of whom are no longer with us. But behind the mostly beautiful facade of sights and sounds, there lies the issue of the functional part of level design. The vast majority of areas are just eye candy. They are visually striking but painfully simplistic from a gameplay perspective. In Act 1, there is nothing you could call a proper dungeon like the Mausoleum or Under Sigil. And while the lack of more intricate level design is not that big an issue for me, some fans of the Infinity Engine games might be displeased. Although, when you think about it, Blizzard and Baator does remind you that Planescape Torment features traps. This isn't the answer to the problem though, because the Nameless one is a walking detect trap. Even if he fails, the Berg will just get up after a short dirt nap. This late in this particular game, traps are a slight annoyance at best and utterly useless at worst. Maybe using them to trigger status effects or placing them cleverly in boss fights would be a better approach. The Temple of Baal in Baldur's Gate sure was a nasty surprise for those not in the habit of scouting ahead, although it puzzles me how such parties would even make it out of the Cloakwood, but okay. Aside from traps, gameplay-wise Blizzard and Baator relies on looking for portals, riddles, and mostly optional fights. In Act 1 there are several opportunities to quickly grow in power, both for the Nameless one and his party. Like say, some conversations provide wicked permanent stat bonuses if led correctly. I'm not sure about the gameplay balance further down the road, but the story forces you into a party of 4 by the end of Act 1. Although I think the party size is temporary and imposed simply to make room for the new companions joining in Act 2. As for their identity, I talked about it in my previous video on Blizzard and Baator, and save for some details, it appears I got it mostly right. In any case, stats come in handy in and outside of combat. Normally, I'm happy to play a relative pacifist. Alas, due diligence required me to jump headfirst into this dumpster called AD&D 2nd Edition and pick a fight. And because the game is called Torment, not Pleasure Cruise, I cranked that difficulty slider all the way up. If I'm to be in pain, I want it crippling. Bear in mind though, the difficulty setting only changes the amount of damage your opponents deal. It's not more difficult to win so much as it's more difficult not to lose. Was it worth it? Let me put it this way, Blizzard and Baator is no Siege of Dragonspear, which I believe has the best combat of all Infinity Engine games. Sue me. So far, I think only the final fight of Act 1 is challenging. First off, you're ambushed and limited to a party of 4. Then, the enemies are varied and they use nasty stuff like Pain Mirror. This is the kind of fights I'd like to see more of in the rest of Blizzard and Baator. Something to figure out, not wait out like the rest. Of course, Planescape Torment is a unique case because the Nameless One is immortal. You put him into the dead book and the berg just gets up and comes right back at you. On a long enough timeline, the survival rate of everyone but him drops to 0. When you think about it, you can't lose a fight. You can only lose patience with the wear down tactic. In that final fight I mentioned, using the death mechanics is a perfectly reasonable approach. You respawn in a previously inaccessible part of the map, sneak up on the oblivious enemies and give them hell. I just kept throwing spells, dying, getting right back up until they were all dead. I was like, yeah, I can keep doing this all night, can you? It's not an exploit, it's a feature. As for the optional boss fights, let me tell you, I'm glad they are optional. I just can't decide whether it's because they are challenging or frustrating. The former implies a skill issue, the latter, bad design. Personally, I don't find it fun to spend, say, 20 minutes on a boss who is next to impossible to hit, resists most magic, keeps healing itself, and dishes out a lot of damage. At some point, you're inevitably out of ammo and there is nothing else to do but to keep hacking, slashing, and healing till one of you drops. I prefer my combat tactical, not attritional. And herein lies another problem. War of Attrition favors fighters, and Blizzard and Baator seems to cater to them first and foremost. Playing a talkative mage, I felt my build was an afterthought. Plenty of hammers and axes and nobody to wield them. With other items, my party either already had something better or had no use for them at all. Allegedly, version 101 improved it, or so the patch notes vaguely say. Although if you're after items, you can easily steal a good portion of them and use them against their original owner. And this is yet another issue, actually. On one hand, you can steal super important items, as in practically holy relics. But a locked door in some rat-infested shithole of a bar will keep you out because fuck you, player. I detest arbitrary rules like this, in the Infinity Engine games and beyond. And I'm not even kidding. Remember that character who loved to talk about meaning? They have 2 states only, challenging when you fight them and challenged when you're robbing them blind. If you're a metagamer, the payoff is insane. You can earn experience for the debate, pickpocket your interlocutor, steal their biggest treasure, and present it to them to start a fight. This earns you even more experience and a shiny new hammer. If there is one constant in the multiverse, it is that fortune favors murder hobos.
Updated my journal.
When it comes to unintended things, bugs specifically, most of the issues I ran into and reported have been fixed by now, so there is no point in dwelling on them. However, the English version isn't fully proofread still, which really showed in version 1.0. Nothing terrible, mind you, but if minor punctuation or grammar issues really bother you, maybe you should wait for version 1.03 or whatever number the fully proofread version will end up having. To sum it all up, I see potential in Blizzard and Baator. Act 1 has got its problems, sure, but it otherwise provides 2 or 3 evenings of solid entertainment. I'm genuinely curious what happens next, and I'm hyped for Act 2, which is the best recommendation I can give at the moment. The mod is so high effort that I could see Beamdog releasing it commercially, and yet it's freeware, which brings me to my final point. I know some people either wait for the whole thing to come out or write the mod off altogether because it's not written by Chris Avellone. I dare say even MCA himself might not pull such a legendary game ever again. In Exile Entertainment tried and failed despite having both the talent and the budget to do so. Cania Believe It Works clearly put their hearts and souls into this mod, and the result is impressive. Just play Act 1 and see if it's your thing, even if you're convinced nothing can match Planescape Torment. Perhaps it's true, but you can still give yourself a chance at being pleasantly surprised. Also, join the mod's Discord and share your feedback. Or tell a friend about Blizzard and Baator. That sort of support genuinely matters for projects made by community for the community. And the same goes for hitting that subscribe button too. Thanks for watching, and I promise I'm back to making content. Cheers.